They say justice is blind. But on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, Officer Rick Stanton proved that arrogance is the only thing truly blind to the truth. When he saw a black man in a tailored suit stepping out of a vintage Jaguar E-Type, he didn't see a pillar of the community. He saw a suspect. He didn't see a man who had spent 40 years interpreting the Constitution. He saw a target. Stanton thought he was making the bust of the century. He had no idea that the man he was shoving against the hood wasn't just a driver. He was the one man in the state who could end Stanton's career with a single phone call. This is the story of how one corrupt cop picked a fight with Supreme Court Justice Desmond Cole and learned that when you strike at a king, you better not miss. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. That's how Sergeant Rick Stanton liked it. It gave him an excuse. Slippery roads meant probable cause. Dark skies meant suspicious behavior was easier to articulate in a report. Rick sat in his cruiser, the engine idling with a low hum, hidden in the blind spot of the on-ramp to I-5. He was 3 hours into a double shift. His coffee was cold, and his quota was low. Rick wasn't a bad cop in his own mind. He was proactive. That's what he told the rookies. You don't wait for crime to happen, he'd say, tapping his temple. You go find it. But to the residents of the South Precinct, Rick Stanton was a predator with a badge. He had a file of complaints an inch thick, excessive force, racial profiling, intimidation, but they always vanished. The union rep, a guy named Walsh, made sure of that. Rick felt untouchable. Then he saw the car. It was a 1967 Jaguar E-Type, silver blue, gleaming even under the grey drizzle. It was a piece of art on wheels, the kind of car that cost more than Rick's house. It was moving at exactly the speed limit, signaling perfectly as it merged. Rick narrowed his eyes. Check that out, he muttered to his partner, a younger, nervous transfer named Ben Hayes. Lot of car for this side of town. Ben looked up from his phone. It's a classic, Sarge. Probably just passing through to the ferry. Maybe, Rick said, shifting the cruiser into gear. Or maybe someone took it for a joyride. You see the driver? Ben squinted as the Jaguar passed. Yeah, older black guy. Suit. Rick smirked. Older guy. Expensive car. Middle of a Tuesday. Doesn't fit. Let's run the plates. Rick pulled out, tailing the Jaguar. He didn't run the plates immediately. He wanted to see if the driver would flinch. He rode the bumper of the vintage car, his push bar inches from the chrome. He wanted to induce a mistake, a swerve, a brake check, anything. Inside the Jaguar, Justice Desmond Cole sighed. He adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes calm but sharp. Desmond was 62 years old, with salt and pepper hair cut close and a posture that had survived decades of hunching over legal briefs. He was currently the longest-serving justice on the state Supreme Court. He was tired. He had just come from a keynote lecture at the University Law School and was looking forward to a quiet evening with his wife, Beatrice. He saw the cruiser aggressively tailing him. Desmond didn't panic. He had been a black man in America long before he was a judge. He knew the drill. 10 and 2, he thought. Signal early. Maintain speed. Come on, Rick muttered in the cruiser. Give me a reason. Desmond didn't give him one. He signaled for the exit toward the affluent Mercer Distinct, moving smoothly. He's got a tail light out, Rick lied. Sarge, I can see them both, Ben said, sounding uneasy. They're fine, I said. Rick turned to Ben, his voice dropping an octave. I saw a flicker. That's a safety hazard. Light him up. The red and blue lights exploded in Desmond's rearview mirror. He didn't slam the brakes. He eased the Jaguar to the shoulder, careful of the wet leaves, and put the car in park. He turned off the engine. He rolled down the window. He placed his hands clearly on the steering wheel. He waited. Rick took his time getting out. He adjusted his belt, puffing out his chest. He walked with that slow, swaggering gait he had perfected, hand resting near his holster. He didn't approach the window immediately. He walked around the back of the Jaguar, tapping the tail light with his baton, hard. Thwack. Desmond flinched slightly but didn't turn around. He knew the tactic. Intimidation. Make the driver worry about the property. Rick finally strolled up to the driver's side. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask for license and registration. He leaned down, chewing gum loudly. "Whose car is this?" Rick asked. Desmond looked at him, his face a mask of judicial neutrality. "It is my vehicle, officer." "Your vehicle?" Rick chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "This is a 67 E-type. Pristine condition. You know what these go for?" "I am aware of the market value." "Yes," Desmond replied calmly. "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" "I was adhering to the speed limit." "Tail lights flickering," Rick said, dismissing the question. "Step out of the car." Desmond paused. "Officer, for a tail light infraction, I can remain in the vehicle while I provide my identification. My wallet is in my breast pocket. I am going to reach for it now." "I didn't ask for your ID," Rick snapped. "I said step out of the car. I smell alcohol." It was a blatant lie. Desmond hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in 20 years. "Officer," Desmond said, his voice deepening, taking on the resonance he used when delivering a verdict. "I have not been drinking. I am a state Supreme Court justice. My identification is in my pocket. If you allow me to show you—" Rick laughed out loud. He actually threw his head back. "A judge?" "Yeah. And I'm the Queen of England. You think I haven't heard that one?" "I know the mayor. I'm a lawyer. Save it. Get out of the car now, or I drag you out." Ben, the rookie, was standing by the passenger side. He looked pale. "Sarge, maybe we should check his ID first." "Shut up, Ben," Rick growled. He ripped the door open. "Last warning, out!" Desmond Cole looked at the young officer, then back at Rick. He saw the aggression in Rick's eyes, the dilated pupils of a man high on a power trip. Resisting would lead to violence. Desmond knew the case law. He knew the statistics. He unbuckled his seatbelt and slowly stepped out into the rain. "Turn around," Rick barked, hands on the hood. "This is unnecessary," Desmond said, his $2,000 suit soaking up the rain. "You are making a grave error." "The only error here is you thinking you could boost a ride like this and drive it through my town," Rick said. He grabbed Desmond's wrist and twisted it behind his back, harder than necessary. Desmond winced as his shoulder strained. Rick kicked Desmond's ankles apart. "Spread 'em! Wider!" Desmond took a breath, smelling the stale tobacco on the officer. "Officer, I am informing you that I am submitting under duress. I am requesting your badge number and your supervisor immediately." "You want my supervisor?" Rick leaned close to Desmond's ear. "You're under arrest for suspicion of grand theft auto, driving under the influence, and resisting arrest." "Resisting?" Desmond whispered, disbelief coloring his tone. "I have not moved." "You're running your mouth," Rick said. "That's resisting my patience." He slapped the cuffs on. The cold steel bit into Desmond's wrists. Click, click. For 40 years, Desmond Cole had decided the fate of men in chains. Now, he wore them. And as Rick Stanton shoved him toward the cruiser, Desmond didn't feel fear anymore. He felt a cold, sharp clarity. He has no idea, Desmond thought. He has absolutely no idea what he has just started. The back of the police cruiser smelled of vomit and pine cleaner. It was a humiliating cage designed to strip a person of their dignity. Desmond sat awkwardly, his hands cuffed behind him, pressing painfully against his spine. He watched through the plexiglass as Rick Stanton tore through his Jaguar. Rick wasn't searching. He was ransacking. He was pulling papers out of the glove box and tossing them onto the wet pavement. He was rummaging through Desmond's leather briefcase, containing sensitive case files regarding a high-profile corporate merger, and throwing them onto the passenger seat. Ben Hayes stood by the cruiser door, looking at Desmond. The rookie looked like he wanted to vomit. "Officer," Desmond said. His voice was muffled by the glass, but his gaze was piercing. Ben opened the rear door slightly. "Sir, Look, if you just stay calm," Ben stammered. "Officer," Desmond said, his voice steady. "What is your name?" "Hayes." "Officer Hayes. Officer Hayes, listen to me carefully. That briefcase the sergeant is currently mishandling contains privileged judicial documents. They are sealed by the state. If he reads them, or if they are damaged by the rain he is exposing them to, he is committing a felony. You are witnessing a felony. If you do not intervene, you are an accessory." Ben swallowed hard. He looked at Rick, who was laughing as he pulled a bottle of sparkling water from the back seat. "Look at this. Fancy water. Probably stole that too." "Sarge!" Ben called out, his voice cracking. "Sarge, maybe we should run the VIN number before we tow it." "I already called the tow," Rick yelled back. "This guy's going downtown. We'll sort out the paperwork later. I want this car impounded. It's probably part of that ring hitting the north end." Rick walked back to the cruiser, holding Desmond's wallet. He flipped it open. He glanced at the ID. "Desmond Cole," Rick read. "Well, Desmond, nice wallet. Where do you lift it?" "Look at the badge next to the license," Desmond said. Rick flipped the flap. There was a gold badge, inlaid in the leather. It didn't say police. It didn't say security. It said, "Justice, State Supreme Court." Rick stared at it for a second. The rain drummed on the roof of the car. For a brief moment, silence hung heavy in the air. A smart man would have stopped. A smart man would have apologized, uncuffed the suspect, and prayed for mercy. But Rick Stanton wasn't a smart man. He was a bully who had been challenged. And when a bully is challenged, they don't back down. They double down. He snapped the wallet shut and tossed it onto the dashboard. "Fake," Rick said. Desmond blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said it's fake," Rick said, climbing into the driver's seat. "You can buy those badges online. Supreme Court Justice." "Give me a break. You think a Supreme Court justice drives around alone on a Tuesday? You think a justice looks like you?" The racism hung in the air, thick and toxic. "Officer Stanton," Desmond said, memorizing the name tag now. "I'm going to give you one chance to call Captain Reynolds. I know him personally. Call him. Verify my identity." "I'm not calling the captain for a car thief with a props department badge," Rick sneered. He put the car in drive. "You're going to the holding cell. You can tell your fairy tales to the drunk tank." As they drove away, Desmond twisted his body to look out the back window. He saw a tow truck backing up to his Jaguar, his pride and joy. He saw his legal briefs soaking in the rain on the asphalt where Rick had dropped them. Desmond closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He began to construct the case in his mind. Fourth Amendment violation, lack of probable cause for the stop, excessive force, destruction of property, failure to verify identification, malicious prosecution. But it was worse than that. Rick Stanton had just effectively kidnapped a high-ranking government official. The ride to the station was silent, save for the static of the radio. When they arrived at the precinct, Rick made a show of it. He parked right in front. He yanked Desmond out of the car, parading him past the front desk. "Got a big one," Rick announced to the desk sergeant, a woman named Beverly. "Grand theft auto. Impersonating a reckless driver. And get this, impersonating a judge. Beverly looked up. She looked at Desmond. Her eyes went wide. Beverly had worked at the precinct for 20 years. She handled the paperwork for the warrants. She knew every judge's signature in the county. She had seen Desmond Cole's face on the news 3 days ago when he delivered the majority opinion on the housing crisis bill. "Rick," Beverly said, her voice trembling. "Rick, wait!" "Book him," Rick said, pushing Desmond toward the counter. "I gotta go write the report." "Rick," Beverly stood up. "That's Judge Cole." "Yeah, that's what his fake ID says," Rick laughed. "Desmond Cole." "No, you idiot," Beverly shouted, silencing the room. "That is Justice Desmond Cole. I processed his warrant authorizations last week. That is him." The room went dead silent. The other officers stopped typing. A phone rang in the background, but no one answered it. Rick froze. He looked at Beverly. He looked at Desmond. Desmond stood tall, despite the cuffs. He straightened his spine. He looked Rick Stanton dead in the eye. "Officer Stanton," Desmond said, his voice calm, cold, and terrifyingly precise. "I believe you have my wallet. Inside, you will find a card for the district attorney. I suggest you call him, or, if you prefer, you can call my wife. She is having dinner with the governor tonight." Rick's face went from flushed red to a ghostly, sickly white. The gum fell out of his mouth. Rick stammered. "I thought." "You didn't think," Desmond interrupted. "You assumed. And now, Sergeant, you are going to remove these cuffs. But do not think for 1 second that removing them undoes what you have done. The clock has started." Just then, the double doors of the precinct burst open. Captain Reynolds stormed in. He wasn't wearing his jacket. He looked like he had run from his office. He saw Desmond in cuffs. He saw Rick standing there. "Get those cuffs off him," Reynolds roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Now! Stanton, what have you done?" Rick fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped them. They clattered on the floor, sliding to Desmond's feet. Desmond didn't move. He looked down at the keys, then back up at Rick. "Pick them up," Desmond said softly. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Rick crouched down, humiliated, in front of the entire station. He picked up the keys. He stood up and unlocked the cuffs. Desmond rubbed his wrists. He checked his watch. "Captain Reynolds," he said, turning to the horrified commander. "Justice Cole," Reynolds said, looking like he might faint. I have no words. This is a kidnapping," Desmond said, "and an assault, and a civil rights violation." He turned back to Rick Stanton. "Sergeant, you asked me earlier if I knew the value of my car. I do. Do you know the value of your pension? Because you just gambled it away." The silence in the South Precinct was heavier than the humid Seattle air outside. Captain Reynolds was sweating. He was a man who had spent 30 years navigating the politics of the police department, dodging scandals and shaking hands, but he knew, looking at Justice Desmond Cole, that his luck had just run out. Desmond sat on a hard plastic chair in the booking area. His wrists were red and chafed. His suit, a custom-tailored charcoal wool from a tailor in London, was stained with mud and rain. Reynolds held out a bottle of water and a wet wipe. "Justice Cole," Reynolds said, his voice pleading. "Please, let's go to my office. We can get you cleaned up. I can have a car take you home right now. We can expunge this record immediately. It was a misunderstanding, a terrible glitch in the system." Desmond didn't take the water. He didn't take the wipe. He looked at Reynolds with eyes that had seen murderers, corporate thieves, and corrupt politicians beg for leniency. "No, Captain," Desmond said. "I don't think we will expunge anything. In fact, I insist you finish the booking process." Reynolds blinked. "Sir, you arrested me," Desmond said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "Officer Stanton, excuse me, Sergeant Stanton, arrested me. He read me my rights, albeit while twisting my arm near the rotator cuff. He brought me here. If you release me now without a record, it's as if it never happened. And, Captain, I want the world to know this happened." "Justice Cole, please," Reynolds hissed, glancing around at the other officers who were pretending to work. "This will be a media circus, for the department, and for you." "For me?" Desmond laughed dryly. "I have tenure, Captain. My reputation is built on the law. Your sergeant's reputation is built on breaking it. Take my mugshot." "I can't do that," Reynolds said. "If you don't," Desmond said, leaning forward, "I will add failure to adhere to booking protocol and cover-up of a false arrest to the lawsuit I am already drafting in my head. Book me. Fingerprint me. I want the timestamps. I want the evidence." Reluctantly, Reynolds nodded to Beverly. She looked like she wanted to cry. She led Desmond to the height chart. Click. The camera flashed. Desmond Cole, Justice of the Supreme Court, stared into the lens not with shame, but with a burning, righteous fury. That photo, he knew, would be on the front page of the Seattle Times by morning. While this was happening, Rick Stanton was pacing in the break room. He had called his union representative, a man named Walsh. "Walsh, you gotta get down here," Rick hissed into his phone. "It's bad." "How bad?" Walsh's voice was gravelly. "Did you hit him?" I used standard control techniques," Rick lied. "He was resisting." "Who is he?" "Desmond Cole." There was a long silence on the other end. "Rick," Walsh said, his voice dropping. "You mean the judge? The one who just ruled against the police union on the pension reform case last month?" "Yeah," Rick said, feeling sick. "That's him." "You idiot," Walsh whispered. "I can't fix this, Rick. I can't sprinkle fairy dust on a Supreme Court justice. Did you charge him?" "I brought him in," Rick said. "But Reynolds is freaking out. He's trying to cut him loose." "Don't say another word," Walsh commanded. "Don't write a report. Don't talk to Reynolds. I'm sending a lawyer. Sit in the break room and shut your mouth." Rick hung up. He looked at his reflection in the break room mirror. He looked tired, but the arrogance was still there, lurking. He's just a judge, Rick thought. It's my word against his. I smelled alcohol. That's my story. I smelled alcohol. He got belligerent. I followed protocol. He was convincing himself. It was the lie he had told 100 times before. Back in the main lobby, the doors swung open. It wasn't Walsh. It was Nathaniel Pierce. If Desmond Cole was the shield of the law, Nathaniel Pierce was the sword. He was the top civil rights attorney in the state, a man who wore three-piece suits like armor, and whose smile was known to make grown men weep. He walked into the station like he owned the building. "Where is he?" Nathaniel's voice cut through the room. Reynolds hurried over. "Mr. Pierce, I assure you, Justice Cole is safe. He is—" "I don't care about your assurances, Captain," Nathaniel snapped. "I care about the Fourth Amendment, which your sergeant seems to have used as toilet paper today. I want to see my client. Now." Reynolds led him to the booking area. Nathaniel saw Desmond. He saw the dirt on the suit. He saw the way Desmond was holding his shoulder. Nathaniel's face went cold. He turned to Reynolds. "You injured him." "It wasn't me," Reynolds stammered. "Who?" Nathaniel asked. Reynolds pointed toward the break room. "Sergeant Stanton." Nathaniel looked at the door. He didn't scream. He didn't shout. He pulled out a gold fountain pen and a notepad. "Captain," Nathaniel said softly, "I hope your body cameras were on. I hope your dash cams were recording in 4K resolution, because I am going to peel this department apart, layer by layer, until I find the rot. and then I'm going to burn it." Just then, Ben Hayes, the rookie, walked in from the garage. He looked pale. He was holding a piece of paper. "Captain," Ben said, his voice trembling. "Not now, Hayes," Reynolds barked. "Sir, it's about the vehicle," Ben said. "The tow truck driver. He didn't secure the Jaguar properly. The flatbed. The chains slipped." Desmond looked up sharply. "My car?" Ben swallowed hard. It rolled off the back of the truck, sir. It hit a guardrail. The rear axle is snapped. The bodywork is crushed." Desmond closed his eyes. That car had been a gift from his late father. It was the one thing he did for himself. Rick Stanton walked out of the break room just in time to hear this. He smirked, a small, involuntary smirk. Nathaniel Pierce saw the smirk. "Is that him?" Nathaniel asked Desmond. "That is Sergeant Stanton," Desmond confirmed. Nathaniel walked up to Rick. He stood toe-to-toe with him. "You find this funny, Sergeant?" Nathaniel asked. "Accidents happen," Rick shrugged. Maybe if he hadn't resisted, he'd still have his car. Nathaniel smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Sergeant Stanton, that car is the least of your problems. By tomorrow morning, you will wish you had never been born. I am going to take your badge. Then I am going to take your pension. Then I am going to take your house. And when you are living in a box under the I-5 bridge, you will remember this moment." Rick laughed. "Get out of my face, counselor." "Rick!" Reynolds shouted. "Go home. You are on administrative leave effective immediately." "Fine," Rick said. He grabbed his jacket. He walked past Desmond. "See you in court, Judge. Hope your record is clean." He walked out into the rain, thinking he had won the round. He didn't know that the war had just begun. Rick Stanton went home to a silent house. His wife, Linda, was already asleep. He opened a beer and sat in the dark living room. He replayed the stop in his mind. He had done everything right, according to the street code. You dominate, you control, you don't let them talk back. He turned on the TV. The late-night news was on. The anchor, a serious woman named Rachel Brooks, was looking at the camera. The headline banner read, "Supreme Court Justice Arrested in Traffic Stop." Rick sat up. "Already?" "Breaking news tonight," Rachel Brooks said. State Supreme Court Justice Desmond Cole was arrested this afternoon by Seattle police. Sources say Justice Cole was pulled over for a minor traffic violation, which escalated into him being handcuffed and booked. The screen changed. It showed the mugshot. Desmond Cole, looking dignified but furious, mud on his collar. Then the screen changed again. "We have obtained dashcam footage of the incident," Rachel said. Rick froze. How? It had been 4 hours. Dashcam footage usually took weeks to release. "Captain Reynolds," Rick whispered. Reynolds had leaked it. He was throwing Rick to the wolves to save his own skin. Rick watched the TV. He saw his own cruiser following the Jaguar. Voiceover, Rick. "Check that out. Not a car for this side of town." Voiceover, Ben. "Probably just passing through." Voiceover, Rick. "Or maybe someone took it for a joyride." "I was profiling," Rick said to the empty room. "They're going to say I was profiling." The video continued. The stop. The aggression. The way Rick ignored Desmond's calmness. The way Rick laughed when Desmond said he was a judge. Voiceover. "Rick, a judge? Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England." Rick winced. On TV, stripped of the adrenaline, he didn't look tough. He looked pathetic. He looked like a bully picking on a grandfather. Then came the kicker. The footage showed Rick ransacking the car, throwing the legal papers into the rain. The news cut back to Rachel Brooks. She was joined by a legal analyst. "This is shocking," the analyst said. "There was no probable cause. The taillights were clearly working in the video. The sergeant initiates physical contact immediately. And the search of the vehicle? That is a blatant Fourth Amendment violation. This isn't just a bad stop, Rachel. This is a civil rights lawsuit waiting to happen. Rick's phone started blowing up. Text messages. From Walsh. Don't answer your door. From Ben Hayes. Sarge, Internal Affairs is calling me. From unknown numbers. Racist pig. Watch your back. Rick threw the phone across the room. It smashed into the wall. Upstairs, the light turned on. Linda came down the stairs, tying her robe. Rick? She asked, rubbing her eyes. What was that noise? Why is the phone ringing? Rick stared at the TV. Go back to bed, Linda. Rick, what's going on? She looked at the TV. She saw the footage playing on loop. She saw her husband shoving an older black man against a hood. Is that you? Linda asked, her voice small. He was resisting, Rick snapped. The media is twisting it. Rick, Linda said, walking closer. That's Justice Cole. We voted for him. You said he was the only one with sense. I didn't know who he was, Rick shouted. He was just some guy in a Jag. And that makes it okay? Linda asked. She looked at him with something Rick had never seen in her eyes before. Disgust. You treated him like an animal because you didn't know who he was? What if he was just a regular person, Rick? Would that have made it right? Whose side are you on? Rick stood up, looming over her. I'm on the side of not losing everything, Linda yelled back. Do you know who that man is? He's the most powerful judge in the state. You just destroyed us, Rick. She turned and ran back upstairs. Rick heard the bedroom door lock. The next morning, the karma hit harder. Rick woke up on the couch to a pounding on the door. He looked out the window. News vans. 5 of them. They were camped on his lawn. Reporters were standing in his flower beds. He couldn't leave the house. He went to the kitchen and turned on the radio. Every station was talking about it. The hashtag, Justice for Cole, was trending #1 nationwide. But the worst part wasn't the anger. It was the stories. People were calling into the radio stations. This cop, Stanton, he stopped me 3 years ago. Same thing. Broken tail light that wasn't broken. He arrested my brother for walking in his own neighborhood. He impounded my car and I never got it back. Rick felt a cold knot in his stomach. They weren't just talking about Cole anymore. They were digging up the graveyard of his career. His laptop pinged. He opened it. An email from the department. Subject, Notice of suspension without pay. Body, you are hereby ordered to surrender your badge and firearm by 12:00 p.m. today, pending a full internal investigation. Rick sat heavily at the kitchen table. He thought about calling Walsh again, but he knew the union rep wouldn't pick up. He was radioactive. He looked at the empty driveway where his truck was parked. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he still had payments to make on it. He had a mortgage. He had 2 kids in private school. I can fix this, he muttered. I just need to find dirt on the judge. Everyone has dirt. He opened his laptop and started searching. Desmond Cole scandal. Desmond Cole finances. He didn't find dirt. He found speeches. He found charity work. He found a man who had spent 40 years fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Rick slammed the laptop shut. He realized then that he wasn't fighting a man. He was fighting a monument, and he was just a guy with a hammer who had chipped the wrong stone. While Rick Stanton was hiding in his house, Nathaniel Pierce and his team were at work. Nathaniel's office was a hive of activity. Paralegals were scouring databases, interns were watching bodycam footage, and Desmond Cole was sitting in the conference room, his arm in a sling. The doctor says it's a severe sprain, Desmond said, looking at the x-rays. He tore the rotator cuff slightly. Assault on a government official, Nathaniel said, ticking it off on his fingers. battery, kidnapping. But Desmond, I found something else. Nathaniel slid a file across the mahogany table. We pulled Stanton's arrest records for the last 5 years, specifically traffic stops involving luxury vehicles. Desmond opened the file. There were dozens of them. BMWs, Mercedes, restored classics. Look at the pattern, Nathaniel said. Stanton pulls them over. Always a minor infraction. Tail light. Failure to signal. He finds a reason to tow the car. Suspicion of theft or unsafe vehicle. He arrests the driver, usually on a Friday night so they can't see a judge until Monday. And the cars? Desmond asked. Impounded, Nathaniel said. But here's the trick. They go to a specific lot. Miller's Towing and Recovery. They sit there. The fees rack up. $500 a day storage. The owners often unable to pay thousands in cash immediately or fighting the legal charges, default on the impound fees. And then the lot auctions the car, Desmond surmised. He knew the scam. It was called a lien sale. Exactly, Nathaniel nodded. But look who buys them. Desmond looked at the auction records. Buyer, L&S Auto Sales. Buyer, L&S Auto Sales. Buyer, L&S Auto Sales. Who is L&S Auto Sales? Desmond asked. Linda and Steve, Nathaniel said. Steve is Rick Stanton's brother-in-law. Linda is his wife. Desmond's eyes went wide. He's stealing cars. He's using the badge to seize cars, racking up fake fees so the owners lose the title, and then his family buys them for pennies on the dollar to resell. It's a racketeering ring, Nathaniel said. Rico. This isn't just police brutality, Desmond. This is organized crime. He messed with you because he wanted your Jaguar. He probably had a buyer lined up for the parts before you even got to the station. Desmond leaned back. The pain in his shoulder throbbed, but his mind was sharp. We need a witness, someone he did this to, someone who isn't a Supreme Court justice, someone the jury can relate to. We found him, Nathaniel said. He pressed the intercom. Send in Leo. The door opened. A young man walked in. He couldn't have been more than 22. He was Latino, dressed in work boots and jeans. He looked nervous. Justice Cole, Nathaniel said. This is Leo Vasquez. Hi, Leo said, looking at the floor. It's an honor, sir. Have a seat, Leo, Desmond said gently. Tell me what happened. Leo sat down, wringing his hands. It was 2 years ago. I saved up for 3 years to buy a 2015 Mustang GT. It wasn't new, but it was mine. I put a new exhaust on it, new rims. I was driving home from my shift at the warehouse. And Sergeant Stanton pulled you over? Yes, sir. He said my exhaust was illegal. Too loud. He said he had to impound it for a noise test. He arrested me for disturbing the peace. Leo's voice cracked. I spent the weekend in jail. When I got out, the impound lot said I owed $500. I didn't have it. I told them I'd pay on Friday when I got paid. They said cash only today. By Friday, they said the car was sold. Sold to L&S Auto? Nathaniel asked. Yeah, Leo said. I saw my car a month later. Some rich kid was driving it. I still owe the bank $10,000 on the loan for a car I don't have. Desmond looked at the young man. He saw the injustice burning in Leo's eyes, the helplessness. It was the same helplessness Desmond had felt in the back of the cruiser, but Leo didn't have a badge to save him. Desmond stood up. He walked over to Leo and put his good hand on the young man's shoulder. Leo, Desmond said, you aren't going to owe the bank anything, and you are going to get your car back. How? Leo asked. Stanton is a cop. Nobody listens to me. They will listen now, Desmond said. His voice was low, vibrating with power. Because you are going to stand next to me in court. Rick Stanton didn't just rob you. He robbed the wrong people. He thought he was the law. I am going to show him that the law is not a weapon for thieves. Desmond turned to Nathaniel. File the civil suit, Desmond ordered. But don't just name Stanton. Name his wife. Name the brother-in-law. Name the towing company. Freezing orders on all their assets. I want every bank account they have locked by morning. And the criminal charges? Nathaniel asked. Desmond smiled, but it was a cold smile. I'm having lunch with the district attorney tomorrow. I think he'll be very interested to hear about the Stanton car theft ring. Back at Rick Stanton's house, the power went out. Rick stumbled to the breaker box. It wasn't a fuse. He looked outside. The meter had a red tag on it. He called the power company. Yeah, this is Rick Stanton. Why is my power off? Mr. Stanton, the operator said, we received a court order regarding a freeze on your assets. The direct debit for your bill was rejected by the bank. Your account is flagged for fraud investigation. Fraud? Rick screamed. It's an electric bill. I'm sorry, sir. The account is frozen. You'll have to speak to the authorities. Rick dropped the phone. He stood in the dark. The walls were closing in. He had thought the worst thing that could happen was losing his job. He was starting to realize that was the best-case scenario. He went to the window. The reporters were still there. And now, behind the reporters, a black SUV pulled up. 2 men in suits got out. They were wearing FBI windbreakers. They weren't walking to the front door to ask questions. They were walking with purpose. Rick Stanton ran to the back door, but as he opened it, he saw 3 more agents standing in his backyard, guns drawn. "Richard Stanton!" one of them shouted. "FBI, hands in the air!" The hunter had become the hunted. The Federal Detention Center in SeaTac was a far cry from the break room at the South Precinct. Rick Stanton sat in a concrete room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other men's sweat. He had been denied bail. The judge had declared him a flight risk, citing the millions of dollars in offshore accounts the FBI had discovered, linked to the car theft ring. Rick looked at his lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Peter Kress. Walsh, the union rep, had abandoned him. The police guild had issued a statement distancing themselves from the alleged criminal actions of a rogue individual. Rick was alone. "They're offering a plea deal, Rick," Peter said, shuffling through a mountain of evidence. 20 years, if you allocate, if you give up the rest of the network. 20 years? Rick slammed his fist on the metal table. "I'm a cop. You can't put me in general population for 20 years. I'll be dead in a week." "You're not a cop anymore," Peter said, his voice flat. "You're the head of a Ryco enterprise that stole over $5 million in luxury vehicles, doctored police reports, and violated the civil rights of a state Supreme Court justice. The prosecutor isn't looking for a win, Rick. She's looking for a trophy. And you're it." Rick slumped back. "What about Linda? What about my wife?" Peter hesitated. "Linda turned state's evidence yesterday, Rick. She cut a deal. She claims you forced her to sign the titles. She's testifying against you to keep custody of the kids." Rick felt the air leave his lungs. Linda, the woman he had bought the big house for, the woman he had stolen the cars for. She was serving him up to save herself. The trial began 3 months later. It was the spectacle of the year. The courtroom was packed. Every major news outlet was there. Outside, protesters held signs. "No one is above the law and justice for coal." The prosecution was led by Helen Graves, a federal attorney known as the Reaper for her conviction rate. She didn't shout. She didn't pace. She just laid out the facts, brick by brick, building a prison around Rick Stanton. First came the victims, dozens of them. Doctors, teachers, students like Leo Vasquez. They told stories of being pulled over by Sergeant Stanton, the intimidation, the false charges, the confusion when their cars vanished into the system. Then came Leo. He looked different than he had in Nathaniel's office. He wore a suit Desmond had bought for him. He stood tall. He told me I was nothing, Leo told the jury, pointing a shaking finger at Rick. He told me my car was too nice for a kid like me. He took my keys, he took my freedom, and he laughed. Rick stared at the table, refusing to make eye contact. He could feel the jury's eyes on him. They didn't see a police officer. They saw a gangster in a uniform. But the silence was absolute when Justice Desmond Cole took the stand. Desmond walked to the witness box with a slight limp, a reminder of the rough handling he had received. He raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth. Helen Graves approached him. "Justice Cole, why do you think Sergeant Stanton arrested you that day?" Desmond adjusted his glasses. He looked directly at Rick. "He arrested me because he saw an opportunity," Desmond said, his voice resonating like a church bell. "He saw a black man in a car that he wanted. He didn't see a citizen with rights. He saw inventory. He believed that his badge gave him the power to take what he wanted, and that his uniform would shield him from the consequences. He believed he was the law." Desmond leaned forward. "But the law is not a tool for the strong to prey on the weak. The law is a promise. And on that rainy Tuesday, Rick Stanton broke that promise. He didn't just assault me. He assaulted the very Constitution he swore to protect." The courtroom erupted. The judge, Anthony Rossi, had to bang his gavel 3 times to restore order. Then came the defense, or what little defense there was. Rick insisted on taking the stand, against his lawyer's advice. He thought he could charm the jury. He thought he could explain it away as police instinct. It was a disaster. Helen Graves tore him apart on cross-examination. "Mr. Stanton," she said, holding up a financial ledger found in his wife's safe. "This entry here. Blue Jag, 40,000. Was that the estimated profit from selling Justice Cole's car?" "I don't know," Rick stammered. "I didn't write that." "Your wife says you dictated it to her," Helen said. "She says you called her from the precinct 5 minutes after you arrested Justice Cole. We have the phone records. You spoke for 3 minutes. Did you tell her to prep the auction block?" "I was calling to check on dinner," Rick lied, sweat pouring down his face. "You called to check on dinner," Helen repeated, deadpan. "While processing a high-profile arrest. And did you also discuss the 2022 Porsche you impounded the week before? The one found in your brother-in-law's garage?" "It was a misunderstanding," Rick shouted. "I was doing my job. These people, they were suspicious." "The only suspicious thing, Mr. Stanton," Helen said, closing the file, "is how a police sergeant on a salary of $80,000 a year managed to pay cash for a vacation home in Cabo San Lucas. No further questions." Rick stepped down from the stand. He looked at the jury. They weren't looking at him with sympathy. They were looking at him with pure contempt. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was electric. Rick Stanton stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He looked back at the gallery. His wife wasn't there. His friends weren't there. The only face he recognized was Desmond Cole, sitting in the front row, his face impassive, like a statue of judgment. "We the jury," the foreman read, "find the defendant, Richard Stanton, guilty on all counts." Guilty. RICO conspiracy. Guilty. Wire fraud. Guilty. Grand theft auto. Guilty. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Rick closed his eyes. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was the bailiff, moving to cuff him. The same sound, click, click, that he had inflicted on so many others. But this time, the cuffs weren't coming off. The sentencing hearing was held 2 weeks later. Judge Rossi didn't mince words. "Richard Stanton," Judge Rossi said, looking down from the bench, "you have disgraced your uniform. You have betrayed the public trust. You preyed on the vulnerable. And when you finally preyed on the powerful, your only regret was that you got caught." Rossi adjusted his glasses. "This court intends to make an example of you. For the RICO charges and the civil rights violations, you are sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." 35 years. Rick gasped. He would be an old man when he got out. If he got out. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "all assets seized from you and your conspirators will be liquidated. The proceeds will be used to create a restitution fund for your victims." Rick was led away. He didn't swagger this time. He shuffled. As he passed the gallery, he locked eyes with Leo Vasquez. Leo didn't smile. He just nodded, a slow, solemn nod. It was the nod of a man who had been made whole. 6 months later, the karma that hit Rick Stanton was total and absolute. Because he was a former cop, Rick couldn't be placed in the general population for his own safety. But he wasn't given special treatment either. He was placed in administrative segregation, solitary confinement, for 23 hours a day. He spent his days in a 6x8 cell. He had no window. He had no power. He had no control. The man who loved to dominate others was now completely dominated by the system he used to abuse. His wife, Linda, sold the house and moved to another state, changing her name. She never visited. His children stopped writing after the first month. He was a ghost, erased from the world he had tried to own. Outside the prison walls, the world was healing. The restitution fund paid off Leo Vasquez's debt. But Desmond Cole went a step further. He used his connections to get Leo a full scholarship to the university law school. "You have a good eye for injustice, Leo," Desmond had told him. "We need more lawyers who know what it feels like to be on the other side of the table." And as for the Jaguar, it was irreparable, a total loss. But on a sunny Tuesday in July, a flatbed truck pulled up to Justice Cole's driveway. Nathaniel Pierce and Leo were standing there. "We pooled some resources," Nathaniel said, grinning. "From the settlement." They pulled the tarp off. It wasn't a Jaguar. It was a vintage Aston Martin DB5, silver, immaculate. "It's not the E-type," Desmond said, running his hand over the fender, a rare smile breaking across his face. "No," Leo said. "But the alignment is perfect, and the taillights definitely work." Desmond laughed. He got in the car. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a sound of freedom. He drove down the driveway, merging onto the road. He drove the speed limit. He signaled his turns. He was a black man in a luxury car, driving through Seattle. But this time, when a police cruiser passed him, the officer inside didn't look at him with suspicion. The officer saw the license plate, Justice, and gave a respectful nod. Desmond Cole nodded back. The balance had been restored. Rick Stanton was in a cage, and the truth was finally driving free. Rick Stanton thought the badge on his chest made him a god. He thought he could crush anyone who got in his way. But he forgot the most important rule of power. It is borrowed, not owned. When he tried to crush Desmond Cole, he didn't just hit a man. He hit the unbreakable wall of karma. In the end, Rick lost his freedom, his family, and his name, proving that while the wheels of justice grind slow, they grind exceedingly fine. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and ultimate justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that bullies never win in the long run. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.